What's up, y'all? Sparta here. So, for this video, I kind of want to talk about what I feel kind of made LG go to the wayside as they did and eventually end up leaving the smartphone market. And obviously, this is the LG G8, one of my favorite LG phones. And the main reason I was thinking about this is because with how samey a lot of phones have been getting as of late, it kind of made me miss seeing the even when LG kind of decided to go the same route as everybody else. It was kind of interesting to see how they still try to keep a lot of their DNA intact and kind of to a failing point, I guess you could say, because they wouldn't change enough for some people. For other people, they changed a little bit too much. And where I feel LG, where I feel this whole like falling out with LG began was with the LG G4 slash V10 era of phones. Back when I guess technically you could say the G Flex 2, since that's what initially started it, where the G Flex 2 was using the Snapdragon 810. And if you guys remember correctly, the Snapdragon 810 was a pretty goddamn hot chip. And the problem that the G Flex 2 had is it had severe thermal throttling. And that was to keep the 810 in check, I suppose. And people thought, oh, this was just an LG thing. This wouldn't happen to another manufacturer. Lo and behold, the HTC One M9 comes out, right? Hot as hell. Snapdragon 810 was a very hot chip, and I'll get into I'll get into why I feel even though Samsung decided to go with the Exynos 7420 of that year, their phones were still hot. My Galaxy S6 was a hot pocket, and I don't know why people seem to think that, oh, it was just the 810. No, I think a lot of chips back then, a lot of these processors back then just weren't very well tempered. They weren't very well optimized. And um, push come to shove, when the LG G4 comes out, LG goes to the Snapdragon 808. Temps are better then. They didn't really skimp on anything else in terms of features. People overall seem to like that phone a lot. I like the G4 a lot. And the V10 comes out that same year. The V10 also has a Snapdragon 808. And it's still a pretty well tempered chip. It definitely did get warm from what I remember. Um, that's back when I was using the Note 5 and the V10 side by side. And they got as warm as each other, so that really wasn't anything that was horrendous to me personally, but it was something that I do remember being a thing. But why am I bringing this up? This is really important. It is important because the 808, LG was kind of pushing it a little bit, right? And because that was back when they were doing 1080p 21 by 9 footage, which you can still do, recording, which you can still do on LG phones today. They they were doing more stuff with audio. They had the mics that I know that's more hardware stuff, but the software needs to be coded properly enough so the processor can handle it, right? They were doing stuff like being able to move where you want the mics to, at which side you want the mics to record, whether it be the front or the back, more towards the subject or more towards you, things like that. And this is when LG started getting the Bootloop problem. A lot of people, when it came to the G4, when it came to the V10, and even to like the G5 and V20, people were getting boot loop issues. And this kind of plagued them for a whole year, maybe 2 years. Some people did bring it up with the V30, but I didn't hear it nearly as much. The V40 didn't have the problem. The V50 didn't have the problem. The V60 doesn't have the problem. So it's and it's sad, right? Because that's what a lot of tech reviewers, that's what they held LG to. All they would do was they would call their phones boring when they really weren't. Um, they would say they're not doing anything new, they're not doing anything different, which they were. Um, as Samsung was gearing up to take headphone jacks out of phones, LG was still bringing it, um, and bringing it very well. Um, they were the first, they were one of the first phones to have 4K 60 FPS fully stabilized video, and fully stabilized video that actually looks good. The iPhone stabilized video honestly looked like trash, and I don't understand how people would sit there and say it looked amazing when it was a jittery mess. Whereas this phone, in particular, was the first phone that had the fully stabilized 4K 60 video that came in an update. And the V60, you guys see me do it. You guys have seen me compare the V60 in particular to the iPhone, either 12 or 13 Pro, and you'll see that the fully stabilized video on that looks, it may as well be on a gimbal. And the iPhones still are a little bit of a jittery mess when it comes to that, and a little bit wobbly, not the best in the world. But they were doing a lot of stuff that a lot of these tech reviewers didn't talk about. And they only wanted to bring up the negative, right? They still brought up boot loop issues, even though that stuff had. By the time people were kept bringing up boot loop issues, oh, LG phones boot loop though. It was it was like 2 3 years removed from the G4 and V10, right? And it kind of damaged the image of LG. And that's what made people slowly stop messing with their flagship phones. And when the V60 came out, there was no more G series. So this is the last, I guess technically the G8X is the last G series phone. Um, so then they banked on the V series. And what did people say about the V60? The V60 is doing nothing new. It has a 1080p 60 hertz display. Oh, it's doing nothing amazing. It's doing nothing groundbreaking. Let me see. It had a case that allowed you to have two screens at once that worked very well. It it has fantastic battery life. It it still has one of the best cameras on the market, I would still say today. You can literally see my videos and you'll see, look at all my comparison videos, and you'll see I compared it against the which phone? The S20. I compared it against the S20 FE, the Note 10, the S21 Ultra, the 12 Pro, the 13 Pro, 12 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max. I believe the 13 Pro Max anyway. You can see that the fact that these reviewers were saying these LG's phones didn't compete was just stupid, especially when you didn't keep the same energy with Apple with the 12 Pro Max and the 12 Pro. But oh, when the 13 Pro and Pro Max come out, oh, it's okay, right? Because they finally did it, but they do it half-assedly, where a lot of like system interactions only run at 60 FPS, but games will run, depending on the game, they will run at 120 hertz. And that really doesn't make sense given the iPad Pro and how smooth that runs, right? So my my hypothesis is basically that the boot loop issue plagued the reputation of LG to the point that they really couldn't get past it. They didn't really have to change much about their phones, honestly. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, dated design and all this other stuff." Like, At the end of the day, a phone looks how a phone looks. How does it how does it operate? How does it do the things that you typically do on a phone? How does all that stuff work? And nobody ever wants to talk about that. What they always want to talk about is the fact that LG failed because they didn't try hard enough, because they didn't give a compelling product, even though they gave a phone that literally comes with a dual screen case, a hi-fi quad DAC, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, a big display, a crisp 1080p display too, and a very smooth experience overall. I still contend to this day that my V60 didn't really lag. Like, I can't really remember any sort of instance where it lagged. The 865 is still a very powerful chipset. Um, the phone didn't get hot. Like there's a lot of it. There's a lot of examples and a lot of things I could bring up as to why the V60 is still a phone I would recommend to people today. Even next year, I can recommend it to people until they stop supporting the phone. Which is like what, Android 13. The moment they stop supporting the V60 is when I'll say to stop getting it. Even then, you may want it for things like content creation. You may want it for content consumption. You may want it for the headphone jack. You may want it for a lot of different things. You can still use that phone as a very fantastic emulation device. There's a lot of things you could use that phone for that a lot of people just don't talk about because, oh, your camera is not a 108 megapixel camera, despite the fact that the V60 had more consistent focus. It focused faster, and the photos were far more detailed due to it having a higher pixel binning count than the S21 Ultra. But whatever. I guess we're not going to talk about that because whenever you talk bad about a Samsung phone, the Knights come out. Whenever you talk bad about an Apple product, the the Apple plebs come out. So it ultimately comes down to the fact that LG just couldn't keep up. After that, they just couldn't keep up, and more people were buying their lower end phones anyway. So it would have made more sense to me if they just pulled out of the high end market. But I understand why they were just like, we'll just pull out, period. And it sucks. You guys know how I feel about LG. You can hear it in this video. And I really wish they didn't have to go. But at the end of the day, it's just what happens. Hey, I have my Xperia 1 Mark III. While it's not a complete replacement of what we had, it's giving those pro features. It's giving me the pro stuff that I liked about a lot of the big phones, like the Note series and the V series, obviously. The Xperia 1 Mark III is giving me a lot of that stuff and making me feel very satisfied with the amount of money I spent on it. But that's all I really want to say with this. I don't want to make this a super long video. But I guess I did. It's 13 minutes. This is Sparta. Thanks for watching the next report. Let me know in the comment section below what you feel. What do you feel ultimately killed LG? Because to me, it definitely, the biggest proponent of it is the boot loop issue, because a lot of people asked me throughout the years, does this phone have boot loop issues every time I would cover an LG phone? And I would have to constantly tell them, no, it doesn't. That hasn't really been a thing since the G Ford V10. And yeah, let me know. Like the video if you like it, share with people that are interested, and have a good one.